FM News Talk 97.1.
On-demand audio.
137 delegate clinching the Republican nomination. And saying that evidently just clinched a few sphincters around here.
So we had a big day today. Today was the day where we hit the 1237, right? 1237.
Not a big Colbert fan, but that was a pretty good comment on the Late Show. I don't know how long he's going to be around, but he does come up with some good lines every once in a while. Welcome back to the Marc Cox Show. Happy that you're with us. We're going to get to the Show Me Institute right now. First, let me get quickly to Chuck and let him make his point on 9/11. Chuck, what say you?
Well, that was a good comment that the person had with regards to 9/11, but what I noticed was prior to 9/11, you could take box cutters and knives on, so it didn't have anything to do with the privatized company. Recently, TSA wanted to allow knives to get back on the aircraft, and it wasn't until the stewardess unions and the pilots unions balked at that ended. So TSA is not keeping us safe. They're problematic, and it wasn't that the privatized companies got us dangerous. The system changed because of the knives, and TSA wanted knives to come back on. Interesting.
Chuck, thank you for your point. Appreciate that. Have a good weekend. Yeah, I mean, it's similar to the point I made. I'm not sure that we can give TSA all the credit for the fact that there hasn't been a terrorist attack since 9/11. They have been, though, the front line of implementing new rules, right? There's nothing to say a private company couldn't do that. I'll play Dan Ice's thoughts on it here in a minute. But let me get to Patrick Touhey from the Show Me Institute. Patrick, how are you on this Friday?
I'm great. I've never had a Rob Zombie play-in, but I like it.
Well, I'm glad that you enjoyed that. That's awesome.
And let me tell you, just about your last segment about airports, here in Kansas City, we have a private security company. We don't have the TSA. And we have no more problems because of it than other airports with the TSA. In fact, I dare say we probably have a more smoother working security system.
Well, I do believe, I should say, that all the airports have the option, don't they, of using private companies?
That's a good question. They did at one point, and
okay.
I think maybe that window has been closed or suspended. It was much easier at a point in time to opt for private security. I think it is not as easy now.
Okay. Well, a little bit off the subject of what we were going to talk about today, which was TIF reform.
Yeah.
There was a big push for this. Maybe we didn't get everything we wanted, but before we go any further, I always find out when I talk about TIFs, people's eyes glaze over.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. And I talk about it a lot, and I see a lot of eyes glaze over.
So first of all, give us just a quick layman's definition of a TIF.
Sure. So TIF stands for tax increment financing, and in short, it is not necessarily a bad idea. What it says is that there are some parts of towns, of urban areas that have experienced years of economic decline and blight, and no business wants to go in there and accept the responsibility of investing. It's just too much. And so what government says is, hey, we will let you keep a part of the sales tax and the earnings taxes and the property taxes that you would have paid. We'll let you keep some of that, and you get to put that towards the development. So it's really a way for government to say, we'll help get some of the cost and red tape out of your way and encourage you to develop. But what has happened too often around Missouri and elsewhere is that they don't use TIF to build in legitimately blighted areas, the bad parts of town. They use it in the wealthy parts of town that don't need economic incentives. And so what happens is the wealthy developers who are connected to aldermen and city councilors are first in line to get these subsidies. And the bad parts of town stay the bad parts of town, sadly.
Well, Patrick, I know that you lived in St. Louis for a while before you moved to Kansas City, right?
No, actually, I've been in Kansas City for about 10 years, and I was out in the East Coast.
Oh, okay.
My colleague Patrick Ishmael, yes, lived in St. Louis before Kansas City.
The other Patrick I was thinking of here in St. Louis, we had this horrible, rat-infested, blighted mall called the West County Mall,
yeah,
right in the middle of Des Peres. and it was so awful that they had to declare it blighted so they could tear it down and start over with a little bit of TIF financing.
Well, and sometimes, again, TIF can be well used, but what you find when you look into it is that the government definition of blight is so broad that they can use it anywhere. And
they did, because Des Peres is not blighted.
And in Kansas City, we use it in very wealthy neighborhoods. We say something is blighted. And so it is again, a program that was well intended, and you can see the people's heart was in the right place, but as it is practiced, it's absolutely corrupt.
Well, I mean, I enjoy going to the Elephant Bar over there, so I guess in the end it worked out pretty well. I'm just teasing. The TIF reform that came down was not as all-encompassing as some people would have liked, but explain what cities are going to have to do now if they want to offer a TIF.
Sure. So the first thing is that this TIF reform package that was passed only affects Jefferson County, St. Louis County, and St. Charles County. So it's limited in geographic area. But what it does is it requires that in order for a TIF to move forward, it actually has to have the support of a majority of TIF commissioners, not just, if they deadlock, it can't move forward. And the revenue from the TIF has to actually equal the amount of investment. In Kansas City, we're tearing down a grocery store. The city is tearing down a grocery store, spending $15 million to tear it down and rebuild, and they only expect to generate just under $9 million from the TIF. So we're already underwater. And what this legislation says is you can't do that. It has to be, it has to cover the expenses. And then the third thing, which is really perhaps the most important, is it reiterated that these TIF commissions have to be transparent. They have to publish, the information they use to make decisions. They have to publish their vote so that the people have a chance to keep an eye on what's going on in their government.
And in the past, if a government requested a TIF and it was turned down, they could pretty much override that rule.
Yeah, oftentimes localities could overrule and act as they wanted to. And again, it's become a real problem. And your listeners need only know one thing, really, about TIF is the cities that practice TIF the most in the United States are Chicago, St. Louis, and Kansas City.
Yeah. Yeah, understood. So now they could still provide some tax increment financing, but it's only for like ground preparation, something like that. Is that correct?
Well, that's right. And ultimately, the cost of it has to be recouped by the money that will be generated in the TIF. The city can't just say, this TIF is only going to generate a few million, but we're going to give you a whole bunch on the front end.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm glad to see we got somewhere with it. Maybe, was this an issue of knowing that the governor wouldn't sign it, or is he in support of TIF reform? Do we know?
Well, the problem with TIF is that it doesn't know any partisanship. Republicans are just as eager sometimes to give money to developers as any Democrat is, and so it's not a matter of Republican versus Democrat. Sometimes it's just a matter of the people who are in power and the developers that fund their campaigns can use government policy to enrich one another, and that's really what needs to change. And so sometimes just getting a few votes. It may have been, for example, that legislators outside of St. Louis were willing to vote for this because it didn't impact them.
Yeah, that's a good point. Very good point. Patrick Touhey with the Show Me Institute. I appreciate you being with us. It's showmeinstitute.org. We will work on that bumper music to make sure we have it again the next time you're on.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
All right. You have a good weekend. Thank you very much. So there you go. All you wanted to know about TIF and the fact that you could be of the opinion that the rule change didn't go far enough. There will still be TIFs. But the point is to make sure that they're used in the right place, right? Where it makes sense. Did you think that the West County Mall was blighted? That the Dove needed to be freshened up a little bit? I don't know. I mean, what they built there is pretty nice. But to me, that argument, and I'm in city government, so I know this, that argument doesn't hold water. Because if the demand is there, the developer will come in and use their own money because they're going to make money off of it. You shouldn't have to put up taxpayer money like that to draw in development. Either economy or whatever your base is going to support it, or it's not. This is you're throwing bad money after good, or you're just giving it away to the developer, one of the two. And I'm all for development, don't get me wrong, but I'm also for a little bit of a free market system there. Or if it's going to work, if somebody has developed the solar panel to beat all solar panels, they shouldn't need to borrow $1 billion from the government to get it off the ground, because private investors will come in and they'll fund it because they know they're going to make a fortune. 314-969-9797. Still ahead. Apparently, if you refer to somebody who has identified themselves in the past by something they're not, you're apparently racist. They're changing the rules on us, ladies and gentlemen. We just have to prepare for it. I'll tell you about the latest attack on Donald Trump coming up here in just a couple of minutes. And I mentioned this yesterday and didn't get to it. But did you know that in New York City, you can now choose from 31 different gender identities, and it's okay? But if you try to buy a 32-ounce soda, they'll tell you no. Where are our priorities? Really? It's Memorial Day. We're back in just a minute. 314-969-9797.